Good afternoon. I'm Peter Scholes. I work at the medical school. We're delighted to have you with us this afternoon. The world premiere you're about to hear is about you. It's dedicated to you. It was written for you. It was composed in part by you, and it's all about you. Part of it will be performed by you. The piece was commissioned by the Curtis Institute of Music to honor the work that you did and the patients you cared for during the pandemic. Mary Javian, who's here someplace, directs the outreach program for Curtis. Alan Tolbert of Curtis, one of Curtis alumni, directed the project. The composer is hiding in the background here. Ed Babcock. It'll be performed by the Viano Quartet, currently in residence at Curtis, and 4 of your co-workers will present each of the first 4 movements of this quartet. It's called the Hero Quartet, but it's a quartet in music math. It really will have 5 movements. The last movement will be preceded by the comments of Dr. Deborah Harder, who works with us at Jefferson. Deborah is also the host of the Metropolitan Opera live broadcast series, and she's on the air in New York today, so she can't be there. I'll do my best to represent her part. Now, this is not rock and roll. This is music for thought and reflection. It may bring back some painful memories for some of you and certainly some strong emotions. But it's about you and what you do. It's who you really are. I'm going to ask you to hold your applause till the end of the piece to preserve its continuity. And I want to say one thing privately. I was a Navy surgeon. I've seen my share of heroism and taken care of my share of heroes. You put yourself in harm's way for the service of others. You're heroes. Shruti?
Hello, everyone. Oh, can everyone hear me? Good. Okay. So, as Peter said, my name is Ted Babcock. My name is Ted Babcock, and I'm the composer of the piece you're about to hear. So, just to set up this work, in the spring, earlier this year, I was asked to write a piece based off of the texts of frontline workers of Jefferson Hospital. Each movement of the piece you're about to hear was inspired by one of the texts of one of the people sitting behind me here. It was a difficult piece to write. I found myself straddling, when I thought about this piece, I found myself straddling between the inevitable and the absurd. Inevitable in that I knew one day when the pandemic ended that someone was going to ask me to write a piece about it, because this is something that's kind of typical of composers, is that oftentimes when there's a tragedy, you get asked to write a piece about it. So for a lot of baby boomer composers and Gen X composers, that was, the 9/11 movement, and there were a lot of pieces written about that. And that was something that I sort of knew might be on the horizon for me eventually. But absurd in the sense that, like a lot of tragedies that have a definitive moment or sort of day where we all knew where we were, we all knew what we were doing. There was no such moment for that, for the COVID-19 pandemic, and also that it was ongoing. So how did I encapsulate that in a work? And ultimately, this piece could never encapsulate that. And so instead, what I tried to do is at least encapsulate my experience of a little bit of the feelings that I was feeling during that time, and to try to mix that in a little bit with the feelings of what other people were feeling during that time that I got in these wonderful reflections that you're about to hear today. So you'll be hearing a string quartet mixed in with some sounds from my personal instrument that I play, the vibraphone, which is supposed to symbolize those two things sort of mixing together of a sort of intense personal experience combined with a collective experience that we all experience together. So that's about it. Thank you very much for listening.
Hello, my name is Shruti Chandra. I am an emergency medicine physician who works here at Jefferson. A few years ago, when we all learned about COVID-19, nobody knew what the future would hold. I was in charge of the medical students rotating through the emergency department and was working to make their experience better. I was planning our first trip with my husband. We had just gotten married. I certainly did not know that we would be fighting this COVID fight for so many years, that my students would have to be removed from the emergency department for their own safety, and that we would not be taking that trip, and that I would be practicing medicine in an entirely different way. We learn about disasters and train in simulations, but the reality of the pandemic was a whole new beast. One of the most difficult aspects of the pandemic was that I had to relearn how to treat patients, because every day science learned something new, which meant that what we thought worked yesterday wasn't the best option today. But as we saw more, we learned more, and that's how research and science works. I remember feeling anxiety and dread as I read the reports of the deaths, of the lack of equipment, of the health workers' plight. I was lucky that here we always had the appropriate PPE for us. I felt relatively protected when I was working, but working in the emergency department translated to taking a risk every day. Going into every patient's room was a challenge. I did not know if and how I would be able to treat them, and I did not know what I would be exposed to, and if this was the time that my PPE would fail or that I would contract COVID. Every day before I left work, I wiped down every single surface that could have been exposed. My badge, my stethoscope, my shoes, my pen, my phone, my bag. I scrubbed my hands up to my elbows at the hospital, and when I got home, I put my scrubs straight away into the washer. And as I showered, I washed away the virus and tried to wash away the day as best as I could. I still do that every shift. I constantly worried about my family, my colleagues, my friends, my patients. I worried about the patients I took care of that day and if I had done enough. I worried about my loved ones who could become COVID patients, who had become COVID patients, those who were really far away, and I was trying to coordinate their care for them in different time zones halfway across the world. But everything changed focus for me when, during the pandemic, I became pregnant with my first child. Until then, I had never thought about not going to work. This was my calling. I was going to be on the front lines. I would take care of all patients, those who were grateful for the work and those who were angry at me that their family couldn't be in the room with them, those who had taken all the precautions and still gotten sick, and even those who didn't believe in the existence of the pandemic. I think people sometimes forget that doctors are people too, with lives and families and dreams and anxieties. Sometimes even I forget myself in the work. But when I became pregnant, I had to pause, and I had to recenter my life as an emergency medicine doctor. I didn't stop going to work, but I hoped for more compassion from my patients. I expected people to take more responsibility as human beings. I just wanted everyone to do better. The patients we lost, the patients who were sick, I think about them, I remember them, I mourn them. That is my life as an emergency medicine doctor. I try with all my might, and I hope for the best outcome, and sometimes I get it. But what took a toll on my sanity and well-being was the death and the illness that could have been prevented. I wonder how much could have been different if people had stayed home and not gone to that wedding or that party, or worn a mask, or gotten a vaccine. Maybe that grandmother would not have had to go on the ventilator. Maybe that mother of 4 with lung problems would not have to be hospitalized away from their children. Maybe my friends would not have lost loved ones or patients. Maybe not. But there are too many maybes, and that is not the way I want to remember things. I hope that we do not face another such pandemic or crisis in my lifetime. But I worry for my son, and I pray that when we do face such a thing, people care about others, think about others more than they do themselves. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nicole Cavalier. I am faculty in the College of Nursing as well as a nurse practitioner in the CVICU. I tap my badge and the double doors swing open. As I step foot into the ICU, I see a ghost. The first had once been a man whose closest relative was halfway around the world. We've all made that call many times in our careers. I'm sorry, there is nothing else we can offer. Yet this time it's different. No family or friends at the bedside. The man becomes a ghost in isolation. A few steps into the ICU, I see another ghost. She was essential. She was one of us. Police, firemen, the military, they sign up knowing the inherent risks in their profession. Never had I considered, when I made the decision to become a nurse practitioner, that my work could also kill me. Worse, my work could kill others being around me. I live my life outside these hospital walls in isolation. Heroes, that's what we were called. Sounds of cheers and bells ringing outside the city windows at 7 p.m. each night, for a little while anyway. In the uncertainty of the time, the initial unknown of the best way to combat the disease, wondering who would be next and how sick would they be. Every gesture helped. The cheers, the messages, the free pizza, anything to escape the fear you felt walking into that room, sweating in your plastic gown and gloves, the pressure of the masks on the back of your ears, and claustrophobia with the papper around your head. How long do we have to keep doing this? When will this be over? One day there is a beacon of light, a nugget of hope. In my inbox, the email I was waiting for, the vaccination appointment. This would be the beginning of the end, or so we thought. The fear walking into those rooms had been lifted. Instead, it was replaced by fatigue. 6 months, 9 months, 1 year after the vaccination was made available, the patients keep coming. More ghosts. The young mother who will never see who her newborn baby will become. The son who will not outlive his father. They occupy every room on this floor. They stand behind you, looking over your shoulder as you treat the next patient. I tried, I whispered to the ghost. We learn from every patient, we follow revised guidelines, we look at all the new literature, and we still don't always win. At times you want to scream, other times you are numb. 2 years later, you learn how to live with it. This is now part of your life, part of your work. You and your colleagues who have remained have difficulty remembering what was it like before. There are fewer ghosts these days. I remember every single one of them. I was one of the last people they saw, consciously or unconsciously. And now they periodically occupy my mind and consistently occupy these halls. Fear, anger, hope and joy, isolation, fatigue, guilt, numbness. I couldn't tell you how I feel today. A combination of all, or maybe none. I don't know how long it will take me to process this experience of the past 2 years. I don't know if I am or will suffer from PTSD, as so many of my fellow essential heroes are experiencing. I do know I will wake up tomorrow, put on my scrubs, and come back to work, because that is what we do.
Hi, I'm Melissa Ash, and I'm from the Respiratory Therapy Department. When we were young, the future was so bright is the opening line to an Offspring song, The Kids Aren't All Right. When I think back to pre-COVID times, that line perfectly describes how I felt when I entered healthcare. I loved my job. I was proud to say I was a respiratory therapist, even though most times people did not know what a respiratory therapist was. All of that changed overnight. Suddenly, it seemed that everyone knew what a respiratory therapist was and what my job was. I became a hero overnight, as did my fellow coworkers. However, most of us did not ask for that title, nor did we want it. Our future was no longer bright. We no longer felt young. Instead, we felt like we aged 20 years in 1 week. And the cause of all of this? The COVID pandemic. In the beginning, we were hailed as heroes. We certainly did not feel that way. We were scared to go to work. We were scared that we were going to catch this virus and bring it home to our loved ones. We each had a different story. Some of us had pregnant spouses at home. Some had little kids. Some of us took care of our elderly parents. No matter what our stories were, we all shared the same fear, bringing it home to our loved ones and being the reason that they ended up in the hospital sick or worse, dying. Some of us changed our scrubs at work. Some of us changed in our garages or our kitchens when we got home from work for fear of bringing home the virus with us on our scrubs. There was so much that was not yet known, and that scared us. As the pandemic continued, we experienced events that would change us forever. Physically, the job started to take a toll on us. Every room we entered, we had to put on gowns, gloves, surgical caps, an N95 with a surgical mask over it, and a face shield or a PAPR machine. When we left the patient's rooms, we had to wipe down everything only to start over again for the next patient. Some of us intubated more in the past 2 years than we did in our entire careers. We became experts on how to prone and how to supinate patients. There were shifts where we were lucky to have 20 minutes to eat lunch. We were incredibly busy and short-staffed. Many of us picked up extra shifts to help out our coworkers and not to leave them high and dry. Mentally, it was worse for us. We held patients' hands and told them it was going to be all right when we knew that was a lie. We saw numerous patients say goodbye to their loved ones over the phone or on FaceTime. We held patients' hands as they died alone. We watched family members on FaceTime watch their family members die. We never had time to process what we saw because we always had to move on to the next patient. On our days off, we couldn't do anything fun to decompress. Everything was shut down and canceled. We missed out on sports games, graduations, important events, and just being able to hang out. People were afraid to hang out with us and to see us because we worked with COVID patients on a daily basis. We were exposed, and people did not want to take the chance that we were carrying the virus with us, on us. We were scared that we could be carrying the virus, and therefore we stayed away from our family members and our friends that were high risk. After seeing as much death as we have, we stopped viewing our patients as people, as someone's loved ones. We started to see our patients as a problem that needed to be fixed. If we can't fix that problem, we walk away and we move on to the next problem that needs to be fixed. Over time, the public's view on us changed. We went from being heroes to being idiots. So many people nowadays look down on us and fight us for getting the vaccine and for fighting to keep masks on. We are no longer the heroes that we were 2 years ago. Many of us are embarrassed to admit that we work in healthcare. Many of us want to leave, and some of us already have. We are no longer passionate about our jobs. thanks to COVID.
Hello, my name is Charlotte Tatum. I'm a critical care technician in the CVICU. We have all experienced the same thing, a global pandemic, but that doesn't mean our experiences are the same. How do we even begin to reckon with a more than 2-year event that has radically changed life as we know it? I don't know a solution, a formulaic end, but I think I know the start, a way to begin to heal, to process the unimaginable with a word. We can't heal what we don't see. We can't see if we don't acknowledge. We can't process what we ignore. Healing comes with exposure. How can you bandage a wound that you're afraid to look at or talk about? So much power is in the tongue, speaking to our human existence. So join me as I peek under the bandage. I've been burned, you see, not in a physical fire, rather a symbolic one, and I'm not alone. I've been burned by the 12-hour shift, the trash can fire burning out of control, fueled by a lack of resources, staffing shortages, supply chain disruptions, and a lack of sleep. You're a hero, they said, while the stress piled up. You're essential, they said, while many fought for hazard pay. You're making a difference, they said, while I watched helpless, horrified at massive death. It's a hoax, they said, while I watched healthy and sick alike, here one day and gone the next. It'll all be over soon, but it's already been over 2 years. If you don't work in healthcare, you may not know how hard it can be. The verbal abuse from patients yelling at you or trying to fight for things out of your control when I'm just doing my job, trying to help. What good is being a hero that is constantly burnt out? What good is being a hero that can't pay their bills? What good is being a hero that feels unappreciated? What good is being a hero that is completely exhausted? Sometimes we forget to see the humanity in others because we're all going through something. But today, stop and consider even healers need to be cared for.
The introduction to the last movement of this piece was prepared by Dr. Deborah Harder. Deborah is an emergency room physician and a classical pianist. At the time of the pandemic, she was the morning host at WRTI and program manager at WRTI, Philadelphia's classical music station. Thank you. Deborah can't be with us tonight. She's in New York. The Metropolitan Opera is live, and she's broadcasting. I'll try to read this. I'm not sure that I can do it and stay composed. It's in memory of one of her colleagues and his wife, Bliss Mickelson, one of the morning hosts at WRTI, and is a tribute to the people who cared for him and his wife at the hospitals which they were in, and to you at Jefferson. I'll see you when I see you. Those were Bliss's words every day when he closed the mic on his morning classical radio shift. His kindness came across in the air, and to his colleagues, thoughtful gestures, help with prep work, he didn't give it a second thought. I'm only doing for you what you do for me, he said. When the pandemic first upended the world, broadcasters were essential workers, but didn't qualify for vaccination. For a year, we operated our broadcasting boards hoping that masks, gloves, disinfectants would protect us. That music, thousands wrote in, comforted and consoled us. For Bliss, not being able to see his wife was the greatest hardship. They'd met late in life. She was a musician living in New York. His house was in Trenton. When the travel restrictions between New Jersey and New York were finally lifted, he was overjoyed. Peggy needs some help hanging pictures, he told us one Friday. I'm driving to New York. He returned to work on Monday and told us that Peggy had a bad cold. By midweek, he had it too. It's that damn sinusitis. It gets me every year this time. Temple opened its COVID testing centers that week. His was positive. Then Peggy collapsed at her New York apartment and was hospitalized with COVID. He was distraught at not being allowed to see her. But soon he too was hospitalized in New Jersey. Don't know how long my phone will last. I didn't even bring a phone charger. Never thought I'd have to go to the hospital. Agonizing weeks and agonizing text followed. I'm making progress. They have to take me to the ICU. I'm back in a regular room. I'm getting PT. I should be getting out soon. I ought to be back for my shift next week. But then, Peggy died. All his thoughts were of Peggy. From his hospital bed, he shared his tribute to her on Facebook. Bliss texted one final time, "Back in the ICU, tell the boss, would you?" Later that afternoon, he was dead. When I called the ICU the next morning, by luck, the nurse who had cared for him answered the phone. We couldn't keep his blood pressure up. Nothing worked. He told us he couldn't fight anymore and he wanted to be with Peggy. He asked us to make him comfortable. It was the saddest thing. He fought so hard. We loved him. When he passed, we all cried. I could hear in her voice how hard she worked and how she had cared for my friend. In the voice of this professional and compassionate nurse, I understood the heroic efforts that she and her coworkers made to save their patients. Yes, they and you are heroes. In his love of life, of people, and of music, and the fight he fought, my friend was a hero too. Thank you all for joining us today. It meant a lot to us, and I hope this meant a lot to you. Thank you.